Hello and welcome to Hooting Mandrills. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Sam.
And today we'll be talking about the February 9th Ban and Restricted announcement.
And this is not a drill. They actually did some curation in Historic and Timeless. It's interesting for sure, so we're going to talk about a lot of it. First thing they do is a bunch of alchemy rebalances. Most of them are not especially Historic relevant. Probably the closest one to Historic playability is Prototype X8, which is a little bit easier to cost reduce out now, but it's mostly because it's a popular brawl commander. But there is one big one for Historic. Marooned Surveyor, formerly 2 mana, now 4. So because of the infinite combo with Trelsara Moondancer that just kills your opponent, that is now much harder of a proposition in Historic. 4 is literally twice as much as 2. Probably now dead on arrival. They are still both zenithable, but this just does not seem like a good way of winning games in the format anymore.
So are people going to go back to Sam combo if they want to do this sort of thing, you think?
One of the best things about Sam combo is that it was a good Ajani deck, and so
that's gone.
Alert for that. I don't know what creature combo looks like exactly in Historic, or what the preeminent creature combo deck looks like. There are options that you can play for sure. Yawgmoth is still basically intact and maybe good again. Nadu is legal, albeit nerfed and without really good enablers, but there are ways to build creature combo if that's what you want to do. But the preeminent creature combo deck is gone, and I think that's fine. I wasn't Val Combo's biggest hater, but it was pretty polarized, and it does seem in keeping with a lot of the other changes they're trying to make to the format.
All right, cool.
Let's get into the changes that they're trying to make to the format. So they banned a whole bunch of stuff and unbanned a whole bunch of stuff, and are seemingly trying to turn the page to a new era of Historic with some of the philosophy changed. So Daniel Zhu here writes, at the time of Historic's inception, we established several guidelines for determining what makes a card ban-worthy of the format. Philosophically, Historic was meant to be a place where players could queue up with any card in their collection and feel like they had a chance to compete in a fun, interactive game of Magic. We didn't want them running into mass land denial like Blood Moon, a card that notoriously sees play due to locking players out from casting spells. Free spells, too, detracted from the gameplay experience. The timing stops that free spells constantly inject into the game, along with their rate and strength in internal formats, made them undesirable staples for ladder gameplay, especially when the most popular decks, Elves, Life Gain, Slivers, were on the casual side. This introduced a ceiling on the power and complexity of Historic games. When you queued up on the Historic ladder, you knew that your opponent wasn't going to Solitude your creature while they were tapped out. The average ladder deck had a chance to compete with format mainstays, which included decks like Mono Green Devotion at about the Pioneer power level. Green Devotion has always had cards that were banned in Pioneer in Historic, so people have quibbled about that, but I think that is basically correct, as Green Devotion's maybe biggest hater. I understand what they're saying here, and I understand why this is sort of something that you can no longer really do with Historic. If you've played Historic, like, everything gives a timing stop. If you get annoyed at your opponents playing slow, that is a thing that's going to happen. If you have a Psychic Frog in play, you have priority all the goddamn time. Even the Eldrazi decks have priority all the goddamn time because
It's unplayable. It's so annoying, honestly. Like, if you're used to Standard, it's just, like, completely undoable. I hate Historic for that reason as well, but that's okay.
As a Historic enjoyer, that is like sort of not a thing they could maintain by keeping free spells out of the format, is a point that I am getting to there. And then they say, over time, Historic has come to bear the addition of many powerful transgressive cards, shifting the metagame. The addition of Modern Horizons 3 was a key turning point, you think, as several competitive strategies that function at a modern power level were introduced. The popular ladder strategies remained popular, but they could no longer compete with the top decks in the metagame by win share. And as the decks became stronger, they also became less interactive. The most popular deck used to reach Mythic in Best of 1 Historic plays Persist to reanimate Scholar of the Lost Trove as early as turn 2, setting off a chain of spells that ends the game. The other top decks, even in Best of 3 Historic, forego interaction in favor of linear consistency. Eldrazi, Boros Energy, Val combo, Lotus Field combo, and to a lesser extent Auras are all decks that can end the game in short order without clear counterplay apart from from enact my strategy even faster. I think this too is largely true. It is exacerbated by Eldrazi just being a deck that you can't play fair Magic against. That Boros is sometimes a mid-range deck and sometimes a deck that warps interaction around it because the cards are so good and so powerful, and Fatal Push Thoughtseize is not good against Boros energy, or at least was not good against Ajani Nacatl Pariah. Whatever form it exists in now might be a different story. So there have been times, even since Modern Horizons, when Historic was a little bit more interactive and mid-rangey, but yeah, I think this is largely true, that Historic was very linear, sort of threats outpacing answers. They talked about this in the weekly MTG the other day. It is Thursday at time of recording, that best of 1 and best of 3 are very differentiated in Historic. It's true in Standard too. You get a lot more linear aggro and all-in control in best of 1, but Historic players were born in Digital, molded by it. They didn't see paper Magic until they were already men, and it's also just a more powerful format, so you have a bigger incentive to take really linear Graveyard combo, which is, you know, more linear and faster and more powerful into the best of 1 queue. I don't think I've ever actually seen Scholar combo in best of 3, but it was the most popular deck in best of 1, so that's sort of a wrinkle to this as well.
Kind of nice to see them talking about best of 1, you know, as a different thing than the main best of 3. It's just not the same, and they've in the past ignored it. It's good that they're recognizing it, I think. Let's talk about the cards that are banned first, right? Yeah. I don't think we've actually named them. So Eldrazi Temple is banned, Ajani Nacatl Pariah is banned, Crop Rotation is banned, Scholar of the Lost Trove is banned, Magus of the Moon is unbanned, Harbinger of the Seas is unbanned, Force of Vigor is unbanned, Force of Negation is unbanned, Endurance is unbanned, Wilderness Reclamation is unbanned, Agent of Treachery is unbanned.
Yeah. So, let's start off with what they have to say about Eldrazi Temple. Eldrazi is the most dominant strategy in the high ranks of Historic, and comes in a variety of flavors, all powered by the ramp from Ugin's Labyrinth and Eldrazi Temple. This redundancy is key to the consistency and power of the strategy. We are choosing to ban Eldrazi Temple, as Ugin's Labyrinth has other applications in the format outside of the Eldrazi shell. You can play Labyrinth with some of the big affinity idiots, or to support something like, it's not Through the Breach, because actual Through the Breach is non-arena, but the like alchemy variant Through the Breach is, I think there was one in a recent standard set as well. Cavern Consumed is one of them. We believe an Eldrazi deck without Eldrazi Temple can still be a reasonable strategy in Historic without pushing out slower strategies, as it was between the release of Modern Horizons 3 and Edge of Eternities. As, again, a big-time hater of big mana ramp decks, I think that is probably correct. Talked about this a little bit with some people in the days since the announcement. I felt that Green Devotion was better than Eldrazi in the time right before Edge of Eternities brought Temple. I think that was not the consensus because Eldrazi was more popular. I think it was better against Sorin, which doesn't matter as much anymore, but Eldrazi is a little bit harder to hate out and does a few things a little bit better, even though I think its Goldfish is worse without Temple.
I have no idea. I have not played the format. Stopped playing before Modern Horizons 3, so I can't really. I'm not very useful in this podcast, probably, as a commentator, but I'm happy to hang out.
I am happy to see Temple go. That was the one card that I really wanted to see go. I hate Eldrazi. I am glad it's being checked a little bit. Another card I'm happy to see go is Ajani Nacatl Pariah. If you listen to our...
We've been hating about this card.
I've been upset about this card and the degree to which it sets the rules of engagement for fair Magic in the format for a while, and it seems like they agree. Boros Energy has been making waves in Historic since the release of Modern Horizons 3. Despite adjustments to Galvanic Discharge, Guide of Souls, and Ocelot Pride, the sheer card quality of the deck continues to propel it to a win rate well over 60% at all segments of the ladder. 60%, by the way, is a crazy high win rate. It's probably buffered a little bit by, you know, like they said, people just play elves and goblins and stuff in Historic. People play stuff that is not of Historic power level on the ladder sometimes, but 55% is usually a win rate that
is deemed unacceptable.
That over a sustained period of time is deemed unacceptable. 60 is crazy. The individual card we believe to be the largest rate outlier is Ajani Nacatl Pariah, and I agree with them. And when they first nerfed Discharge, Guide, Pride, I was like, this is basically what I wanted. These are the things that feel like they're putting you under so much pressure. They're putting you under the gun right from turn 1. And someone said, no, Ajani was always the problem. And I think in retrospect, they were right. And as a 2-drop that's nearly impossible to trade profitably against, if Fatal Push or whatever, 1-mana removal spell hits Ajani exactly, great. You only 2 for 1 to yourself by putting them at 2-1 ahead. But if
Ajani flips, the game's over, you lost, yeah.
If they have a Goblin Bombardment when he comes in, you maybe have the timing window of his trigger being on the stack to even get that exchange, which also then puts you down a life. And just like everything about this card is really hard to deal with. The fact that it encouraged Goblin Bombardment so much did a lot of the same things Orcish Bowmaster did to any sort of attempt to play small creatures. Even if it wasn't out of line with the power level of the format at all times, it certainly was setting the rules of engagement, and I'm really glad to see this one gone.
Yeah, I think that this is inappropriate for Historic. Historic is still just MH3 cards and the Alchemy cards for the most part, I think. And a couple command, obviously like Hieroglyph and shit. But like
the good cards,
the
good cards that go through Standard get nerfed in Alchemy. Like it could be about Corey Steelcutter also, but it isn't.
Right? Yeah. Delete Alchemy. That's the main takeaway.
Ajani is responsible for winning any wins on the back of his transformation, and many more simply by attacking and blocking. Though this ban will impact other white-based strategies outside of energy, we believe it is necessary to lower the ceiling of format. They keep saying that, regardless of what they're doing. They keep saying that Ajani goes in other decks and Amped Raptor doesn't. And
where is this white weenie Ajani, Cats, Kindred? Like, where is it? Where is that deck? That deck does not exist. You can't play anything close to that in Historic. If you want to talk about bronze decks in Historic, like, okay, but...
Well, if they had done an Alchemy nerf to Ajani that just removed if you control another red permanent, Ajani deals damage. If you just remove that line, Ajani is totally fine in Historic. He's still a little annoying to deal with, still annoying to point Fatal Push at him, but the Planeswalker side isn't just killing you. That is another thing that Ajani set the rules of engagement on, that if you're trying to use your life total as a resource or stabilize a little low, Ajani just kills you. I'm pretty happy about this one. I'm looking at cards like Crucius, cards like Necrodominance, cards like Death Shadow, and thinking that maybe, I don't even know what other 1 toughness creature I would be hearkening back to besides Crucius from before the time of the Orc that might be playable now, but I think this opens a lot of things up for Historic as a format.
That's good, at least.
I am happy to see Ajani go.
All right. Next up, we have Crop Rotation. So let's see what they had to say. We initially did not pre-ban Crop Rotation from Historic as an experiment to see if it could function in a reasonable power band in a format without Magic's most powerful lands like Gaia's Cradle. After a stint where it fueled Resurgence of Lotus Field combo, we became confident that a forward-facing ban was necessary, especially as more lands like Dark Depths are added to MTG Arena. The constraints that Crop Rotation places on Historic's design space are simply too large.
I hate a lot of this shit. If you put me in charge, I probably would try to just ban around Crop Rotation, say, you know what, Lotus Field, you're gone.
That would probably upset a few people.
It would probably upset a few people. I am not sure it would be correct.
Crop Rotation is certainly the more fun casual card where, they don't have Tron on Arena as like actual Tron. Like having to jump through 1 hoop is too much for Tron. So like,
Tron
I get
is really good when you assemble it
on turn 3.
When you assemble it on turn 6, which is what you have to do with the...
You could already have 7 mana a dozen ways. Yeah, there's no reason to ever want Tron anytime other than in your deck. But yeah, so like that might be a consideration. But yeah, I hate the solitaire stuff. I get it that it's pretty big in Pauper, one of my favorite formats. Not Lotus Field, but solitaire. But like, I don't know. I think this is fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think Lotus Field probably was a little bit too good, and it is the sort of like linear and obnoxious thing that they're trying to tamp down on. I think this is a reasonable ban. I am happy enough with that.
Yeah, like, could there have been like a cool landfall strategy around Crop Rotation? But just like even thinking about trying to do something like that.
I played a little bit of mono green landfall with Crop Rotation. It was not the most exciting, but it was okay. Scythecat Cub's a good card.
No, I love Scythecat Cub. That's a really cool card. But yeah, ultimately, as far as Crop Rotation goes, like, yeah, if you want to play Landfall, just play Standard. It's the best deck in the format right now, or one of them. So, yep, I don't know. I'm fine with it. Anything to take away from Lotus. All right, next up, we're talking about Scholar of the Lost Trove. So, lastly, we are unhappy with the extreme polarity of the Scholar combo deck and are banning the Scholar card to reduce the number of best-of-1 games that end abruptly. It's possible that a different creature will come along that fits into the same reanimation shell, and in that case, we will re-examine the tools in Historic that allow for efficient reanimation. At the same time, we hope that our unbans will give players some options to turn against powerful graveyard strategies, even in best-of-1 Historic.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think I've ever seen Scholar combo in best of 3, but I think this is a good ban. It's really not good, especially if you are going to continue to have best of 1 be a thing, and they sure are, to have this powerful of a linear graveyard deck to just exist in the format. It's almost like having Bazaar of Baghdad or something.
We also talked about Aquatic Subtlety and potentially playing Scholar in that.
Yep.
So
people were doing that
for like the 2 days that they were allowed.
The 2 days they were allowed. I know people who played it had good results in the metagame challenge with it. Scholar was sort of the second creature in that deck, with Hidetsugu and Kairi being the main one, and the less graveyard reliant side of it, but it was in there. It was good, and yeah, I think this is a good ban as well. So now let's move on to some of the unbans. Start with
Free.
Yeah, the free things are free. So on unbans in Historic, these unbans break some of our long-standing heuristics in favor of adding clear counterplay against dominant strategies now and in the future. Though there are some free spells remaining on the banned list that could be unbanned from a power level standpoint, we don't see a positive role for those cards in the metagame and are keeping them banned for complexity's sake. So that's presumably mostly referring to the Flare cycle. And I was scratching my head a little bit at that. At first, I sort of thought that, maybe Flare of Denial comes with steeper restrictions than Force of Negation, and maybe for that reason it would be a better unban. But having played a little bit, largely with a Force of Negation deck in Historic over the past few days, I think I get it. Flare of Denial is not a good catch-all answer for the sort of things that you want free counterspells to police. Flare of Denial protects your combo in Blue Belcher, basically. And
gross.
Because you're playing a bunch of these little cantripping idiots that are fodder for it. Whereas Force of Negation mostly doesn't protect your combo. You can do a thing that they banned out of Modern now. You can, on your opponent's end step, Violent Outburst for crashing footballs with Force of Negation backup.
That's cool, though.
If that's the thing you want to do. I think that's probably fine. Even with Ajani and some of the energy stuff taken down, I think that's probably fine in a MH3 format. I think the flares, I'm not chomping at the bit to have them, and I think that this is probably pretty reasonable, actually. And then the cards that they did unban, they say, overall, Historic's threats far outpace its answers, contributing to its status as a linear, non-interactive format at the higher levels of competition. A recurring theme of these changes is the ability for players to have obvious options for counterplay against these powerful strategies. And as part of that, the ability to address threats efficiently is critical. Force of Negation offers the ability to stop a combo or game-ending spell without snowballing your own game plan, making it an excellent reactive card that can hopefully prop up slower decks. Endurance does the same against graveyard-based combos while being a main deckable creature in best of 1. That's sort of something they were talking about in the paragraph on the Scholar ban as well. It's true, Endurance is a card that you are okay playing in your main deck, and when you're not up against a graveyard strategy, it's kind of just a 3/4 flash for 3, which is not the end of the world. With bans taking the current top strategies down a notch, one linear deck with the potential to become problematic in the future is Affinity. Affinity, or I would say also Auras, are decks you'd be interested in maybe playing Force of Vigor against. Force of Vigor offers clear sideboard counterplay against that and similar strategies that rely on artifacts and enchantments, which would otherwise be difficult to trade favorably against. I was a little hesitant about Force of Negation, but I've played a little bit of Historic over the past few days. I kind of think that these are are actually good.
I don't know, honestly, like, this is kind of a cook take, but, like, I think they kind of need to do... Standard is fine for what it is right now. I don't think any bans were necessary or anything, but I think that they kind of need to move towards free interaction in all formats, or, like, very cheap, very good interaction, if we want the game to be anything more than just coin flip simulator, or, like, whoever plays first, you know, has an extreme advantage just racing to win as fast, because every deck in Standard is like that, and it seems like that's what every deck in Historic was like. I don't know if this interaction helps with that a little bit. Probably does. Now that you have a couple more free spells, I think that free is kind of the price you can pay for interaction in a fast-paced game. So I don't know if this is the kind of thing that maybe needs to start happening in Standard, or they need to start dramatically decreasing the power level of cards, which I don't think they need to do, because then these formats get nothing new and you're just stuck with the same old cards.
Standard gets nothing new if you start dramatically.
Yeah, for 3 years, yeah.
We're still 10 months out from anything rotating out of Standard.
And none of those cards are the ones that matter. Yeah. They've banned all the ones that were good from back then.
They would have to dramatically shrink Standard to power it down. I think that some free interaction is good.
I don't think we need Grief and Solitude and Fury. Yeah, I don't think that that's necessary for Standard or for Historic,
but I think these are actually good to have in the format. Other ones that I was pretty leery of when they made the announcement were Magus the Moon and Harbinger of the Seas. So one of the key pain points of Eldrazi's dominance was the lack of options to turn to against its powerful non-basic lands. Modern, for example, has historically relied on catch-all land hate effects like Blood Moon that are unavailable in Historic to combat powerful land-based strategies. We believe that Magus the Moon and Harbinger of the Seas offer the right amount of interactivity against current and future land decks while inflicting minimum damage to the more casual Historic scene. These creatures are generally easier to remove than an enchantment like Blood Moon, while being clear and effective options against non-basic land-centric strategies. We see the additional effects of making basics matter more as another plus in an Eternal format. So when they announced this, I was kind of thinking, well, you know, Historic's not really a fetch format. You have Prismatic Vista, you have like the Lord of the Rings land cyclers that can find basics through these effects, and you know, you can play, if you have basics in play, you can use creature removal. You can also play Dismember, which even if your lands are the wrong kind for your removal, can clear one of these things. But I had been thinking that this might be a little bit much in absence of fetch lands to give to the format. Since then, I did play a deck with sideboard Harbingers against Titan Shift, and Harbinger felt like a fair thing to be doing to shut off their strategy, and also in Game 3, they had a Burst Lightning to make it die off of one of their many basic lands that they were putting into play on the turn that I needed it to live, and I lost. So it seemed like it was
fair on both sides.
Fair counterplay, and
sometimes
fair
a pain, and sometimes it can get got. Yeah, that seems good. I mean, it's not Blood Moon is a little harder to interact with if all of your shit's mountains, right? Because destroying an enchantment with mountains is hard.
Not typically a red effect. Destroying a creature with 2 toughness is a typically red effect.
And yeah, I don't know. Historic's mana base being weird is part of it. That's part of the format.
That's also true. And it's a part of any format, really.
The mana base is the most important thing of any format. It's kind of what determines the format. Like Pauper having to play all tapped duels is a big part of it. Standard now has really powerful lands, but like when you had to be using pain lands so that you could play 3-colored decks or 2-colored decks, that's not great.
Yeah, Standard has whatever its mana base is at the moment. Pioneer's mana base is now not that different from Standard, apart from having things like Lotus Field and Nykthos in it.
Right.
Historic's mana base is now pretty differentiated from Standard and Pioneer by things like the Land Cyclers and Vista and Arena of Glory and Shifting Woodland and better stuff to go alongside Lotus Field, like Deserted Temple and, you know, so on and so forth. Historic has that. You know, Modern is a fetch shock format. Timeless is a fetch shock format with Strip Mine and Ancient Tomb and Hydroponics Architect.
And Legacy has Wasteland.
Yeah, Legacy is a fetch true duel format with with Wasteland and some of these other cool lands.
Even weird formats like pre-modern have weird-ass lands that kind of make the game strange. Like, you have fetch lands, but no shock lands.
And then Vintage has fetch True Duels, but also effectively 5 Wastelands, and then also Moxen, Black Lotus, Shops, Bazaar.
Right, and Legacy and Vintage
all of the formats are sort of
Cradle.
defined by how mana works, and I think this is actually going to turn out to be a pretty reasonable way to define a format by how mana works for Historic going forward.
I think that's cool. I don't know. It's nice to try out some stuff, and I think with Historic, they needed to try something, and hopefully this makes the format more interesting and fun for players.
Last 2 unbans are sort of just stuff from a bygone era. I did queue into someone playing Rack Control on the ladder. So in addition, we are unbanning 2 cards that are relics of past versions of Historic and believe would be fine to offer positive content in current Historic. Wilderness Reclamation was troublesome when the top of the format was closer to Pioneer's power level, but now it has to live alongside more powerful strategies. Agent of Treachery was banned in large part due to its use alongside Winota Joiner Forces, who is no longer a problem, both due to the format's evolution and a rebalance. Going forward, we intend to prioritize power level and play pattern on a card-by-card basis over our past heuristics when evaluating Historic legality for new additions to MTG Arena. Cards like Force of Negation and Endurance that can contribute to a healthier metagame will no longer be pre-banned as they were in the past. For all of these changes, we will keep a close eye on how the format develops and continue to adjust things as necessary. So yeah, Agent of Treachery, Wilderness Wreck are sort of just like when they unbanned cards like Bitter Blossom or Wild Nacatl or Jace or Stoneforge Mystic or more recently Splinter Twin in Modern. They were banned at a very different time. In the case of Wilderness Wreck and Ancient, they were almost banned for having been annoying in Standard, and when they created the new format, I think they were around for a little while but got banned. And you know, there's not nothing you can do with these cards. Wilderness Reclamation is worth a lot of mana in a deck that can support it. I queued into someone playing 4-color Rec the other day. Agent of Treachery, again, there's not nothing you can do with this card. It's blue. You can Aquatic Subtlety it. It comes out of Meek Attack if you're interested in trying to play that card.
You can persist it, yeah.
This can be a thing that you can persist. Stealing a land on turn 2 is powerful. I think these are good unbans, and having played on the ladder in New Historic, it is sort of a honeymoon period where no one knows what's good in the format yet, so everyone just takes their pet deck out on the ladder to see how it does. So, you know, will I still be happy with Historic in 3 months? You know, I am a Magic player.
We like to complain about with good formats.
So the answer might be no, but the answer might be yes. My first impression is that a lot of these things that I was initially not happy about are maybe better thought out and better for the format than I give them credit for. And so I am, between this and a bunch of new Alchemy cards, I am more excited about Historic than I've been in a long time.
I do think that they should still rebalance Omnath to normal.
I have in my mind this idea that one day I will figure out a way to do Obosh Omnath, and that will make the nerf worth it. Omnath should be unnerfed, but I think they are.
I would say Quarry Steel Cutter too, but since it's in Alchemy, they will never do stuff like that. So
they did a lot with this update, and I think they probably will be starting to re-examine some of the
other balances,
some of the other rebalances going forward. But they made a big sweeping change this time, and
we got to be happy that it seems like they actually are trying to do something, which is not what has been the case ever in Historic. So it's nice that they're maybe trying to curate the format a little bit and make it actually playable.
And now Timeless, and not gonna lie folks, I'm pretty bummed about this one. Necropotence is restricted. With Arena Championship 10 in December, Timeless has been under a good deal of competitive pressure, and mono-black Necropotence variants have emerged as the clear strongest decks. The strategy pairs cheap interaction with fast mana and powerful 2-card combos like Sorin Imperious Bloodlord and Saint Elenda to quickly end the game while disrupting opposing game pieces. Necropotence has allowed this deck to reliably assemble its combos while making it impossible to compete with on a card advantage advantage axis. Necropotence had a breakout performance at the Arena Championship and has continued to overperform since. This is, I think, largely true, that the, what is called in the deep places of Magic Eternal Discord, the Muxus deck, the sort of 8 Necro, Turbo Sorin piles, were a little bit too good. It was clearly the best deck, and the thing about being impossible to compete with on a card advantage axis, even with, genuinely insane cards like Hydroponics Architect and the ability to just play Treasure Cruise or any other Treasure Cruise of the One Ring, or like all manner of these other things were just pretty clearly worse. I took my beloved Necro Scam deck, note the sad Shadow Heart on the slide, out for one last spin, before the bans went into effect, and I was running into stuff that you probably would not see unless people had decided that, a card advantage doesn't really matter. The only relevant way to attack is going after the opponent's life total. I saw actual factual Delver of Secrets.
Gang, gang.
Out of a blue-white tempo deck alongside Architect. That could also be a budget consideration, and then I saw that giant dinosaur from All Will Be One out of a Reanimator deck that has Ward 4 and Trample Haste. And the only reason you'd see that is because they've decided, resolving an Atraxa is not a way to win a game against Necro. I just need to hit them for 7. I just need to hit them for 7 and have a ward that they can't pay, because they can pay the ward on Valgavoth, or you sack a few Chrome Moxes, or in my case, you sack the Solitude, you pointed at it, an Orc Army token, and maybe your Necro itself, and just find a new one. After you've Necroed for as much as you think you need to find a new one, or just be like, whatever, I'll use my draw step after filling to 7, and that'll be good enough. I think that this deck was too good, and I understand that I am, the guy at Eternal Weekend who was entombing for sometimes Life Rhythm the Loam, that I was, not the majority of this card's use in being a casualty of this restriction, but I am still bummed about it.
Right. There's nowhere to play Necropotence anywhere anymore, which is sad.
That's sort of the thing, too, that Legacy preserves Dark Ritual as a pillar of the format, and so Necropotence is banned. But, basically any Eternal format is defined by design mistakes. That is how Eternal Magic works, and it's a question of which design mistakes you're going to preserve as pillars of the format. And there is already a format where Dark Ritual is preserved as a pillar. This is the format where you get to play Dark Ritual. And I would not have minded if they, given that they've shown willingness to do it differently, and Vintage Brainstorm is restricted because Legacy is the Brainstorm format. If you want to play Brainstorm, you play Legacy. You want to play Moxen, you want to play Moxen, you play Vintage. Historic has decided that Lurrus and Mishra's Bauble can't coexist, and they've decided to ban Mishra's Bauble to preserve Lurrus. I don't know that that's necessarily a good decision, but it's one they've made. And I would still have been unhappy. It still would have been a hit to my pet deck, but I would have liked to see them say, you know what, Timeless can still be the format where you get to play Necro at 4. We're going to restrict Dark Ritual. So Necropotence is now, it's now this, more explosive, in some ways more powerful, but also much more dangerous ring that forces you to play a very specific deck around it. And at 1 copy of Dark Ritual, you're only going to have that turn 1 send in a tiny fraction of games, and you're going to have to play cards like Deathrite Shaman and fetch lands, which the Necro decks largely didn't. They played lands that didn't hurt them. I think that would have been cool. That is something that I would have liked to see them explore.
So 5 Necro is still entirely playable. I mean, it's dominance over potence, which is a huge
Yeah, so, I can't play Necro Dominance for the deck that I was playing. The combo specifically relied on dealing damage to myself one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
The Muxus deck was playing for Necro Dominance already and might still exist as a 5 Necro deck in some form. Necro Dominance has many disadvantages, some versions of that deck, like the version that they posted in the article from AC10, we're also playing Entomb Reanimate, which you can't do through a Necro Dominance because it Leyline of the Voids you. And, people who've played a lot of this deck say the Necropotence is a lot better. It is kind of a critical mass deck. If you turn 1 Dark Ritual, Necro Dominance, go up to 5 versus going up to 7, Chrome Mox Pitch, Sorin Elenda is 6. So, as an example, even if you have Chrome Mox Pitch, land Sorin Elenda, the difference between Necropotence and Necro Dominance might be Grief Blackheart. card to, continue doing your explosive thing. There is a real difference, and people who piloted this deck a lot have said that, sometimes I would beseech my Necro Dominance out to get a Necropotence. You can still do that with Necropotence at
as
1.
a 1, yeah, that's fine.
But it is a real difference and is going to make that deck worse, but maybe they aren't completely shit out of luck. So while we are willing to give decks a good deal of leeway in Timeless, the Necropotence deck is a clear power level outlier and requires action. I do agree with that. We believe mono-black combo decks will continue to exist after this change. I agree with that. But their consistency and ability to compete on a card advantage axis will be more in range with the rest of the format. We will continue to monitor developments in the format after this change, scrutinizing strip mine decks in particular. Currently, however, none of these decks meet our bar for action in Timeless. And I think that is true. I think 4 strip has been thus far more reasonable than I thought it might be going in part because, whatever, a Lotus Petal is good enough. A Lotus Petal that trades 1 for 1, which is what your land is if it gets strip mine, is gonna do the thing. It casts Dark Ritual, Necro, and nice 1 for 1 exchange, idiot. And, whether that is still true, whether they need to either restrict strip mine or rebalance Hydroponics Architect, I am not sure. But here I am, just sitting here holding up my beloved skull, saying, alas, poor Necro. I knew him, Jeremy, a fellow of infinite cards, of most excellent fancy. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times, and now, how abhorred in my imagination it is. My gorge rims at it. Here hung those lips that I have kissed I know not how oft. Where be your griefs now, your combos, your rituals, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set the table on a roar? Not one now, to mock your own grinning, quite chapfallen. And scene.
So could you play any Timeless? Obviously you could play a different deck, but is there anything in Timeless that interests you now that Necro is sort of done?
I think that I might be interested in going back to the Rakdos versions, something like the Rakdos versions that I used to play before Modern Horizons 3, because Red Shadowheart does work with Necro Dominance, and there's another card that we'll talk about in the relatively near future out of the TMNT set that can similarly kill with Necro Dominance, and so that might be a 5 Necro way to play these sort of a little bit less combo, but still some combo, mid-rangier Necro scam shells that I like so much. I think that the blue decks are cool, blue tempo, and maybe I would
not
try
show
those
and tell,
out.
Obviously.
I'm more excited to play Historic right now.
No, that's fair, totally fair.
But I'm more excited to play Historic now because those changes I think are big and exciting, and a lot of things that I've wanted for that format for a while, and I'm probably going to take a little time away from Timeless to grieve my beloved deck being removed from the format, but I do think that they needed to hit this deck. Like I said, I would have done it differently. I would have been interested to see if they could have done it differently by hitting Dark Ritual instead, but any ban, even a necessary one, is always going to be hitting someone's best deck. I am in charge of design and format curation for my own card game. It's not an easy thing, and there's always going to be someone sad about something being gone, even if it needed to go.
In conclusion, unban Heartfire Hero and Monstrous Rage from Standard. Just kidding. But yeah, no, it's fair. It's fair enough. Sometimes your card gets got, sometimes the card that you hate playing against gets got. So it's all about making formats not be all one thing. And if they are all one thing, it's completely horrible, especially if that thing is not targetable, if there's nothing you can really do. So yeah, I'm glad they did this stuff. Eldrazi Temple was against the format's regulations, I think. So I think that one was a no-brainer. And I think that, like I said, the free spell stuff, we need to move towards more cheap and free interaction because it's the only way to play. If the threats are going to keep getting better, we have to also have some answers, and answers kind of have to be free sometimes. Any final words on any of this before we wrap?
I think that's it from me. Like, comment, subscribe. Those are the final words.